Have you look at the jar of strawberry jam sitting in your fridge right now? You probably spread it on your toast this morning, thinking you were getting a nice, wholesome hit of fruit to start the day. Well, brace yourself, because that vibrant red spread on your crumpet has likely never been in the same room as a whole, genuine strawberry. I know that sounds like absolute hyperbole, the kind of shock horror nonsense you see on clickbait thumbnails, but it is the cold, hard truth. The preserves and jam industry in the UK is pulling off one of the most brilliant, entirely legal magic tricks right under your nose on the supermarket shelves. We walk into Tesco or Sainsbury's, see a lovely picture of a sun-drenched orchard or a rustic country kitchen on the label, and we willingly hand over our cash. But here is the kicker. You are not buying a premium fruit product. You are buying highly processed glucose-fructose syrup, industrial gelling agents, and clever graphic design. That idyllic orchard on the jar isn't a map of where your food came from. It is just a corporate logo designed to make you feel warm and fuzzy inside, while they feed you cheap industrial filler if you stick around until the end of this video. You are going to walk away with a complete superpower the next time you navigate the supermarket aisles. You will find out exactly how the major food conglomerates use legal loopholes to hide what is actually inside their jars. I will show you the precise mathematical trick they use to cut costs while inflating the price tag, and we will break down the exact words on the label that serve as an immediate red flag. By the time we are done, you will know more about what you are eating than 90% of the shoppers pushing their trolleys around Waitrose or Asda. And make sure you watch all the way through, because the most shocking offender on our list, the brand that completely takes the mickey with its premium branding and outrageous pricing, is sitting at the very end of our breakdown. And I guarantee it is a household name you completely trust. Before we start naming and shaming the specific brands lurking in your larder, we need to understand the basic mechanics of how a jar of jam is actually made, and how the industry completely flipped the recipe to line their pockets. To make a proper traditional jar of strawberry jam, you need about a pound of whole, fresh fruit. But strawberries are a nightmare for a massive corporate supply chain. They are seasonal, they go mushy in transit, and when you cook them down, they lose a massive amount of volume. That is expensive and unpredictable. You know what isn't unpredictable? Industrial sugar syrup. It is dirt cheap, completely shelf-stable, and tastes exactly the same every single batch, whether it was made in January or July. So the corporate accountants did the maths. They realized they could use just enough real fruit to satisfy the bare minimum legal definition of jam, and fill the rest of the jar with cheap, ultra-processed sweeteners. It is not a culinary choice. It is a balance sheet optimization strategy. To understand how they get away with this, we have to look at the legal architecture governing British food standards. Under UK law, specifically the Jam and Similar Products Regulations, a product labelled as extra jam generally requires a minimum of 45% fruit content. That sounds like a solid safeguard, right? Well, here is the massive loophole. The law allows manufacturers to use fruit concentrate or puree, and it still counts towards that fruit percentage. Fruit concentrate is essentially a heavily processed, water-stripped industrial syrup. On a legal checklist, that dark, sticky syrup counts exactly the same as a fresh, hand-picked British strawberry. The regulation cannot tell the difference, and the front of the label certainly won't tell you. It gets even worse when you look at products labelled as fruit spread instead of jam. The term fruit spread has no strict legal standard of identity regarding minimum fruit content. Brands use that specific phrasing deliberately to completely bypass the legal minimums required for traditional jams. They can pack the jar with apple or pear juice concentrates to sweeten it, drop the actual strawberry content through the floor, and still charge you a premium because it sounds natural and health conscious. It is a logistical illusion played out on your breakfast table every single morning, and it is time we turned the jar around to see what we are actually swallowing. Let us dive straight into the skip list, starting with the household names you see dominating the supermarket shelves week in, week out. First up is Hartley's strawberry jam, specifically their standard flagship line with the famous green lid. Hartley's is practically a British institution, owned by Hain Celestial, and it traces its heritage back to the 19th century in Lancashire. Generations of Brits have grown up with this brand, associating it with nostalgic school dinners and cozy family breakfasts. But flip that iconic jar around and read the fine print on the back. The ingredient list tells a very different story from the wholesome heritage image. You will see glucose-fructose syrup listed as the absolute first ingredient, followed by sugar and then strawberries. When an industrial corn or wheat-derived sweetener appears before actual fruit and standard sugar on the list, you know the corporate priority shifted from quality to cost-cutting long ago. In fact, Hartley's standard jam only contains about 35 grams of fruit per 100 grams of product. You are paying for a jar of highly processed sugar syrup that has been thickened up with industrial pectin and tinted red to look like a fruit harvest. It costs around £1 to £1.50, depending on where you shop, which sounds cheap until you calculate the cost per serving of actual fruit. You are effectively paying a premium for liquid sugar wrapped in a nostalgic British label. It is a sugary trick dressed up as a family favourite. If you already feel like checking your own kitchen cupboard after that, hit the subscribe button right now, because the corporate corner cutting gets significantly worse from here. Let us move on to our next offender, Robertson's Golden Shred Marmalade and their fruit jams. Robertson's is another massive name in British culinary history, famous for its historic branding and deep roots in the UK breakfast market. Consumers trust it implicitly because it feels like a piece of national history. However, if you examine the back of a Robertson's strawberry or raspberry jar, the industrial reality smacks you in the face. Much like Hartley's, the dominant engine of this product is glucose-fructose syrup. Journalistic investigations into mass-market British jams, including reports by consumer watchdogs like Which, have repeatedly pointed out how major manufacturers use these multi-tiered liquid sweeteners to bulk out products, while keeping real fruit content to the bare, absolute legal minimum. The physical experience of eating this stuff is highly telling. It has a strange, overly gelatinous, bouncy texture that mimics a jelly rather than a rich, fibrous preserve. When you spread it, it shears off in flat, glossy chunks instead of showing the real, textured seed and pulp structure of actual crushed fruit. It tastes intensely, aggressively sweet, completely masking the natural tartness of a real berry. At over £1.50 a jar, it is a total rip-off when you realize you are mostly buying a laboratory-grade thickener saturated with cheap syrup. The historic recipe was entirely sugar and fruit, but as the brand scaled to supply every major supermarket chain from Morrison's to Asda, the authentic formula was quietly gutted to protect corporate profit margins. Robertson's gives you a lovely slice of British history on the label, but a pure dose of industrial manufacturing inside. Now let us look at the supermarket own brand budget lines. Specifically Asda Just Essentials Strawberry Jam or the equivalent basic ranges at Tesco and Morrison's. These products are completely transparent about being budget options, and that transparency gives us an unfiltered look at the absolute floor of the jam market. Flip the Asda Just Essentials jar over. You will find that cane sugar doesn't even make an appearance. It is powered entirely by glucose-fructose syrup, water, a tiny fraction of fruit puree, fruit pectin, and citric acid. The label proudly states it is made with real fruit, which is technically legal because a small amount of strawberry puree is thrown into the mixing vat. But what the marketing team leaves out is that the primary weight and structure of the product come entirely from industrial corn or wheat derivatives. It costs less than 40 pence, which makes it highly attractive during a cost of living crisis, but you are literally buying coloured acidified sugar water held together by gelling agents. The actual strawberry content is so minuscule that it cannot even establish a natural fruit flavour on its own, requiring heavy hits of acidity and regulated flavour enhancers to make your brain think it is eating berries. It is a financial race to the bottom where the consumer loses all nutritional value just to get a red spread for their toast. But the absolute peak of this supermarket deception belongs to a brand that markets itself as the healthy, sophisticated alternative. I am talking about St. Dalfour Strawberry Spread. This brand sits on the top shelves of Waitrose, Sainsbury's and Tesco, commanding a massive premium price of around £3 or more per jar. The packaging is elegant, featuring French styling, an elongated glass jar, and bold claims about having no added sugar and being 100% fruit. It sounds like the holy grail for health-conscious shoppers. But let us apply some basic investigative journalism to this premium darling. When you flip the jar, the very first ingredient listed is fruit juice concentrates, specifically grape and date juices. Actual strawberries come second. This is where the legal architecture of the food industry becomes a total circus. By using heavily concentrated, highly processed fruit juices that have had all their water, fiber, and natural structure stripped away in an industrial factory. St. Dalfour can legally claim they add no refined sugar and that the product is all fruit. But biologically and chemically, that concentrated grape and date syrup behaves exactly like any other highly refined industrial sugar syrup. It spikes your blood sugar in precisely the same way. More importantly, using a massive percentage of cheap grape and date concentrate means that over 60% of your expensive strawberry spread is actually just a filler syrup made from entirely different, cheaper fruits. They are charging you a massive premium for strawberries while secretly filling the jar with industrial grape juice. It is an elite logistical magic trick that turns cheap background fruit into an expensive premium product, making it the most cynical deception on the entire British supermarket shelf. And now, what it was worth watching all the way through for. We have waded through the sticky industrial swamp of corporate cost-cutting, so let us talk about the brands that actually respect your breakfast table and deliver exactly what they promise on the front of the jar. Finding a genuine jam in a British supermarket shouldn't require a degree in chemistry, but luckily there are companies out there refusing to play these cynical formulation games. The first recommended name on our list, and our absolute best value champion, is Bon Maman Strawberry Intense. Do not confuse this with their standard line, which is decent, but the Intense range is where the brand completely shifts the paradigm. Produced in the southwest of France, but distributed heavily across every major UK supermarket from Tesco and Sainsbury's to Asda and Morrison's, Bon Maman built its reputation on the iconic gingham lid and traditional faceted glass. With the Intense range, they back up that rustic imagery with brilliant raw material integrity. Flip this jar around and you will find a beautifully brief ingredient list. Strawberries, sugar, black mutton juice, lemon juice, and fruit pectin. That is it. Notice what is missing? There is absolutely zero glucose fructose syrup and no ambiguous fruit syrups hiding in the top spots. Strawberries are the absolute first ingredient by weight, accounting for a massive 60% of the product, which easily clears the standard legal threshold for extra jam. When you spread this onto a hot scone, the sensory difference is immediate. It doesn't shear off in flat, glossy, gelatinous sheets like the industrial alternatives. It cascades with real, fibrous fruit texture, visible strawberry seeds, and massive, recognizable chunks of real fruit that have been gently simmered down. The taste isn't an aggressive, tooth-atching wall of refined sweetness. It hits you with the natural, bright, slightly tart punch of a real harvest because the fruit is allowed to do the heavy lifting. In terms of price analysis, a jar will typically set you back around £2.80 to £3. When you break that down to a cost per serving, you are paying mere pennies more per breakfast compared to the industrial sugar syrup brands. Yet you are receiving nearly double the actual fruit content. It is an absolute masterclass in supermarket value, proving you do not have to spend a fortune to escape the corporate syrup trap. Moving up the ladder to our mid-range organic selection, we have Clear Spring Organic Fruit Spread. This is an exceptional option for anyone looking for zero refined sugars without falling into the concentrated juice trap pulled off by other premium brands. Available at Waitrose, Ocado, and specialised health food shops across the UK, Clear Spring operates under a strict organic philosophy that completely rejects mass-market industrial shortcuts. Their strawberry spread contains just 4 ingredients: organic strawberries, organic apple juice concentrate, fruit pectin, and citric acid. Now, you might look at that apple juice concentrate and think it is identical to the trick used by mass-market brands. But the distinction lies in the proportions and certifications. Clear Spring uses 100% organic ingredients, and the actual strawberry content is kept exceptionally high at over half the weight of the entire jar, meaning the apple concentrate is used purely as a gentle, balanced sweetening agent rather than a cheap, deceptive bulking filler. Because they use high-quality, sustainably grown heritage fruit varieties, the spread completely dispenses with the need for synthetic flavorings or red colorants. When you open the jar, the aroma is subtle and genuinely fruity, smelling like cooked summer berries rather than a synthetic confectionery factory. The texture is smooth, elegant, and highly spreadable, making it an ideal choice for families who want a cleaner, lower glycemic option for children's sandwiches. A standard jar costs around £3.50. It is undeniably more expensive than mass-market options, and the downside is that it can be harder to track down if you do not shop at Waitrose or online via Ocado. The taste profile is also noticeably less aggressively sweet than traditional British jams, which might take some adjustment if your palate is conditioned to high fructose syrups. However, that price markup goes directly toward strict organic farming certifications and a total absence of industrial chemicals, making it a completely justified investment for health-conscious shoppers. Finally, at the absolute premium peak of our list stands Tiptree Little Scarlet Strawberry Conserve, crafted by Wilkin & Sons in Essex. This brand holds a royal warrant and has been manufacturing preserves on the same estate since 1885. They do not just purchase fruit on the global spot market, they grow their own distinct historic cultivars. The Little Scarlet Strawberry is a tiny, wild variety that is notoriously difficult to grow, yielding minuscule crops that must be harvested by hand within a very tight seasonal window. Flip the iconic Tiptree jar and the ingredient list is flawless. Sugar, Little Scarlet Strawberries, gelling agent, citrus pectin and acidity regulator, sodium citrate. It is a completely pristine formula that belongs in a traditional home kitchen. Because these tiny strawberries contain an incredibly intense, concentrated natural flavor and low water content, cooking them creates a conserve of unparalleled rich complexity. The sensory experience is phenomenal. The jar is absolutely packed with whole, intact, miniature strawberries that burst with a deep, sophisticated flavor that tastes exactly like a British summer afternoon. Now, let us be completely honest about the price analysis. A small jar of Little Scarlet will cost you anywhere from £5 to £7. It is a luxury product, and the markup reflects the genuine, massive agricultural costs of hand harvesting an exclusive, low-yielding crop in the UK without using cheap international imports. It is not an everyday budget choice, but for special occasions or a weekend treat, it represents the absolute pinnacle of British preserve craftsmanship, where the premium label perfectly matches the extraordinary reality inside. Now that you know exactly how the big food conglomerates operate behind the scenes, you need a quick, bulletproof toolkit so you can audit the jars on your own when you are standing in the middle of the supermarket aisle. Take a mental screenshot of these golden rules, because they will completely protect your wallet and your health. First, apply the top 3 rule every single time you pick up a jar at Tesco or Sainsbury's. Look at the first 3 items on the back label, and if anything other than real fruit or cane sugar appears in those top slots, put it straight back on the shelf. Second, treat glucose-fructose syrup as an immediate red flag. If it is handling the heavy lifting in the ingredient deck, you are buying a highly processed industrial sweetener rather than an authentic fruit preserve. Third, check the precise fruit declaration, which is always legally stated as the number of grams of fruit prepared per 100 grams of finished product, if that number sits anywhere below 50 grams. The manufacturer is cutting massive corners on raw ingredients. Fourth, do not let the words fruit spread or fruit dessert trick you into a premium purchase, as these specific terms are legally deployed by marketing departments to escape the minimum fruit requirements strictly forced upon traditional jams. Fifth, look out for fruit juice concentrates or fruit syrups dominating the top spots. This means the brand is heavily sweetening the jar with cheap, stripped-down industrial grape or apple waste instead of using real strawberries. Finally, treat premium aesthetic descriptors like finest, special selection, or orchard choice with total skepticism, because these are completely unregulated marketing claims that have zero legal standard to meet regarding formula quality. Let us wrap this whole thing up and summarize the core reality. The modern mass-market jam industry isn't built around feeding you good food. It is built around agricultural waste management and cost-cutting balance sheets. Huge brands manipulate decades of family trust and exploit subtle loopholes in food regulations to feed you industrial starches and highly processed liquid sugars at an inflated cost. But once you shift your thinking and recognize that the front label is purely an advertisement while the back label is the absolute truth, you immediately stop being a victim of corporate marketing and regain full control over what goes onto your breakfast table. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today and digging into the truth behind our food shelves. If you have a mate or a family member who is currently slathering their kids' toast with highly processed industrial syrups every single morning, please share this video with them right now, because they deserve to know what they are actually paying for. I want to hear from you directly in the comment section below, so drop a message and tell me, which of these mass-market brands is sitting inside your larder right now? And which recommended alternative are you planning to replace it with on your next supermarket trip? If you want to see exactly how the food conglomerates pulled off an identical corporate recipe trick with your morning